Well, let's talk now to the Acting Minister of Public Service and Administration, Thulas Nxesi. He was addressing the first international anti-corruption gathering at UNISA in Pretoria earlier today. Good evening and welcome, Minister, and thank you for your time. There's an echo in the messages that you shared where you were speaking and where Chief Justice Zondo was speaking about the impact of corruption in South Africa. What else can you say? And what else did you tell that gathering about just how deeply the effects of corruption reach into South African society?
Well, my message was that fighting corruption is a global concern because corruption is found in both rich and poor countries. And evidence shows that it hurts the poor people disproportionately. It contributes to instability, to poverty, and it's a dominant factor driving fragile countries towards state failure. Here at home in South Africa, the fight against corruption is one of the major priorities of government. And corruption in both the private and the public sector has the detrimental effect on the government's effort to deliver the effective services to the people, as we are hearing it from the clip by the Chief Justice. And this International Anti-Corruption Day, which is commemorated annually on the 9th of December in recognition of the UN's Convention Against Corruption, which was signed in Mexico, we need not just to make it as a slogan, we need to ensure that we put proper campaigns, we put proper programs to deal with the scourge of corruption. Yeah. And as it has been highlighted also by the Zondo Commission.
Minister, why did you begin your keynote to the point that corruption is often characterized as an African problem? Richer countries have it, they're just better at concealing it. Why was it important to begin with the comparison?
I've had to do that because the tendency is to think that some of the people think that corruption first, it's an issue of the African governments. And I argue that corruption knows no color. Corruption, whether black or white, it has been proven here. Syndicates, which have been caught in our case when we're dealing with the PPEs, when we're dealing with the UIF, are syndicates coming from the private sector, working with a group of public servants inside the public service. But also, you heard about the PPE scandal in Britain, highly developed country, which has better systems and so on. So the issue of corruption should be uprooted at all levels across the globe because it does happen. It's just that some people tend to be denialist and only focus on the African countries, whereas it's an international problem.
Should it be easier for us to hold, those in countries like ours where, as you say, it is more blatant, it is more in your face, to hold those people accountable because, the perception is that they get away and this happens with impunity? Well,
let me just say, the establishment of this Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including organs of the state, which was known as publicly as the Zondo Commission, it marked a significant turning point in the government's commitment to deal with uprooting corruption in the public sector. But what was very important about it was the focus on the corruption matters in high-ranking governments and also SOE officials, and which showed that the public, that the state was willing to uproot corruption without regard of anyone's social status. And we've seen this bearing the fruit in the recent arrest and the freezing of the assets of individuals allegedly involved in the state capture. So there's, of course, a long list of individuals and organizations that are yet to face the law. Of course, we respect the due process, but it has become very clear that it's not only at the top echelons. We have to do a lot at the level of the middle management, where there's a lot which is going on there. And in dealing with that, we've had to put a lot of steps in trying to expose corruption.
Well, let's stay with the upper echelons for a moment. And you told that conference that ultimately, on the part of leadership, a voluntary submission to a moral code of probity, which goes beyond legal prescriptions, is what's needed. It seems as if you're speaking directly to the president. Are you there? And if you are not referring to him, why not?
Why should I refer to the president? Because there's a process which has been, which is a parliamentary process, not about the president. And that process, we must just respect the due process. We cannot just simply pick up on that when there is a particular process which has been outlined on how to deal with those issues. And we are not yet sure whether we're talking corruption or what. But let's first get the facts, and then on the basis of the facts we can comment.
So who are you referring to, Minister?
I'm referring to everybody. I'm referring to everybody, the politicians, the senior executives, and so on, all of us. How
do we get to a point where we close the gap between lip service? I know that you say, in certain areas we have had accountability that extends, even to people who might hold a position of power in whichever institution they're in. But we talk about this a lot. This was an earnest, address that you shared today. Chief Justice, the same. But there's a distance between that lip service, at least in the minds of the public, and real accountability where it is happening, given the levels and the extent of corruption in our country, on a far more fast and furious basis, if you will, where there are solid prosecutions, speedy trials, and then sentencing.
Well, if you look at some of the strategies which the government has employed, we have talked, for instance, about adopting the guide on implementing the lifestyle audits in the public service, where the lifestyle audits for public service have become compulsory now, and it follows a number of steps: lifestyle reviews, lifestyle investigation, and lifestyle audits. Those are ongoing, but we must know that these are not going to be just events. They are going to be processes. And when red flags have been shown, such unexplained wealth conflicts of interest are identified in this step, the department will have to move into the next step, which does the investigations. You know what we have done in terms of the key various appointments in the various law enforcement agencies, such as the Hawks, the NPA, and the establishment of the investigating directorate in the NPA. You might recall that during the COVID, we saw massive corruption in the PPE procurement processes, as well as in the UIF terror system. These cases were referred to the Fusion Center of the Anti-Corruption Task Team in collaboration with in a collaborative effort by the South African leading law enforcement agencies, who were sharing the information, who were working on the investigations jointly, and people have been arrested. And there are a number of cases which have been reported, and I think the other day we were told about 246 cases which were registered, with 170 people accused, were charged, and so on. So it's an ongoing process. There's a lot which is being done in order to deal with this, but we must remember that the criminals are also sophisticated. They try to hide their actions, and it's going to need a lot of investigations. It's not going to move quickly as we want it to move. And you know that the asset forfeiture unit has been able to recover a lot of assets, including the monies from the different, those who are involved.
Minister, there'll be a lot more leads. One would imagine if there was more protection for whistleblowers, and this is something that's come up often as a deterrent to raising your head above the parapet and saying something bad is happening here, come and take a look. What can you say about how, through efforts that you're making, and in general, really efforts that are being made to protect whistleblowers in our country and to encourage whistleblowing?
You must remember that this is a multi-stakeholder initiative. You remember that the president has appointed a National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, which is sectoral. It's a sectoral body which has been established primarily to implement and monitor and to render advice to the reports and related to the judicial inquiry and into state capture. And all these are made to deal with those issues. And this council, which is chaired by Professor Thulas Nxesi, is meant to say, let's bring all the stakeholders so that they can be able to raise their concerns. When there are weaknesses, they are able to say, here are the weaknesses which we are seeing, right, including the issue which we are raising of protecting the whistleblowers. So all those issues, but that falls also under the justice cluster. But they are working in collaboration to deal with all those issues. But from our side, for instance, we have been talking in the public administration about the professionalization of the public service, which we have just adopted it as the cabinet. And that also is going to be very helpful in terms of appointing the right people in the right positions who know what is to be done, especially when you deal with the finances, especially when you deal with the issues of construction and so on.
So how would, on a scale of 1 to 10, very quickly, a rating for how well we're doing on corruption, Minister?
That would be very subjective for me to say. I think it's for the public to judge us. I can will give us a high mark only to say, no, we're not doing it. But I think there's a lot which we are doing.
Maybe we'll make that our next question of the day. We'll share the results with you, Minister. Thank you for talking to us tonight. Appreciate your time. The Acting Minister of Public Service and Administration, Minister Thulas Nxesi.